So, Pastor David, we're so happy to have you back with us. It's a blessing to have you back. We missed you this summer, but we can't wait to hear about everything that you did. So, tell us a little bit about where you went. What cities, towns, countries, and what was your favorite spot?
So I went from Charlotte and ended up in Amsterdam. That's where I started the trip. And then after 4 days in Amsterdam, went to Munich, Cologne, and was there for 4 days, then down to Munich, then over to the Black Forest for about a week and a half, and then up to Dusseldorf. I'm going quickly here. I'll fill in the things. Up to Dusseldorf in the north of Germany, and then across the north to Hanover, and to Berlin, and then into Poland for a few days, and then back to Berlin, and then I came home.
So did you like living out of a suitcase, or?
It was actually a backpack. I didn't have a suitcase. I wore a backpack with everything in it, and it wasn't bad. Everything I needed, I carried on my back. Now think about that. Everything I needed, except for I had a bed in the hotel, but pretty much I had my backpack with my clothing, my medicines, and of course my iPad with all my books.
So I know every woman in this room is thinking, how often did you do laundry while you were gone?
That's a good question.
Maybe we don't want to know.
I took 3 pair of pants, 4 shirts, 4 or 5 t-shirts and socks. How many vests? Just 1 vest and 1 jacket. I did laundry 3 times.
Oh, Lord.
It was fine. I showered every day. I didn't stink. And for instance, to wash a pair of pants cost almost, if you did it at the hotel, it was almost $10.
Oh, wow.
So whenever I did laundry, it cost about $75, $80, $90. Now you understand why I wore things more than once.
So we love to eat here at the church. So tell us about what new food did you try while you were gone that you enjoyed?
Oh, yeah. I don't know if it was, well, I would say it was new. In Germany, they have almost 1,000 varieties of sausage. And I tried, the meals are heavy there, and I tried not to overdo eating. But Nuremberg was probably my favorite location for sausages. So enjoyed sausage in Nuremberg. They're small, sort of like breakfast size, but they're whitish pork. Good. Awesome. Am I supposed to share my favorite things in those towns that I went to or not? Is that part of it?
You
Is
can
that
if you
later?
want.
Well, I would just say the highlights. How about if I do that? The highlights of Amsterdam was Keukenhof Tulip Gardens. If you ever get a chance to go to Amsterdam, I would go there. Typically from late March through mid-May, although there was a heat wave this year, and so I got there to see the tulip garden, but all the tulip fields had been picked, so that was a little bit disappointing. Then in Cologne, the cathedral, of course, some of you have been to the cathedral in Cologne. In Munich and Dusseldorf, what I loved, in the center city, they had markets, especially on Saturdays. Families, friends would gather, booths set up with produce, meat, wines, books, all sorts of things. And folks just went, beer garden, and folks just went and visited. And a lot of the stores on Sunday were closed, except for in the train station. So if you didn't have something on Sunday, you were out of luck. Then in Berlin, of course, the things related to World War II were very interesting. We did some touring when my son and nephew came over for Gregory the Great. His castle's outside of Berlin. My nephew's a German history buff, so we did that. And so And then the Black Forest was just beautiful. So,
Was there a favorite spot that you went to?
a favorite.
Favorite spot that you went to?
My
Or what was
favorite
your most
spot.
enjoyable?
That's a hard one. That would be hard to say. I moved around every 4 or 5 days, and so there was something always new to look forward to. That way, in hindsight, I didn't get real homesick because I was moving around so much and seeing different things, and running into different people and different customs, and so that was really, in hindsight, that was much better than when I lived in Switzerland back many years ago. I was in one hotel for 3 months and then went back later for 3 months, and that gets a little old being in the same hotel for 3 months. But here I was moving constantly. So.
Now, you mentioned that your son and your nephew came to visit you for part of the trip. How long were they there for, and where did you guys do together?
So this was toward the end of the trip, after the Bonhoeffer seminar. Carter, my son, and Thomas, my nephew, they flew from Raleigh. They both lived there and flew to Frankfurt, and then got a train up to Berlin. Just an interesting side note, my nephew Thomas said that as they were going across what was formerly East Germany, there on top of a house was a Confederate flag.
Interesting.
So friends, when somebody says that's about our history, yeah, to a degree it is, but it says something else too if the Germans are flying it. And so Thomas and Carter came and met me in Berlin. We traveled, the first day they were there, they walked almost 15 miles. I gave up after 7, and I was proud that I could do that much. And they were there in Berlin with me for 4 days. Then they went south into Munich and other areas. I'd already been there, and I went into Poland. And so we were together for 4 days, and we saw every part of Berlin there is to see together. So that was a lot of wonderful memories. My wife, Willis, had a scheduled program with a bunch of other United Methodist clergy going on the journeys of Paul in Greece. And with that trip and the move, she was not able to come and meet up with me. And so our daughter actually went on that trip with her to the journeys of Greece. So.
All the Greens were in Europe this summer.
Yeah, we were moving around.
So this is kind of a larger question with different parts. So what 3 things did you learn about yourself or others or the countries that you visited?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say one of the wonderful things that you're reminded of when you do travel like that is just how big the world is, and the diversity of the world, and the diversity of people. And that in many ways we're different, but in many ways we're the same. I saw in Poland 2 sisters sitting at the table at a restaurant while the mother was up at the counter getting their food, and the older sister was doing what older sisters sometimes do to their siblings, bossing her around and picking on her. And I thought, but sitting there, I will say, I thought, Poland is not that far from Ukraine. And we know what's going on in Ukraine. What did these 2 little girls have awaiting them in the future? That was an interesting thought, sitting there looking at those 2 girls. So how different and yet how alike we are, was reminded of that. And then what I learned about myself, I like to read and reflect deeply on things. I like to be out of my comfort zone, but not too much out of my comfort zone, in terms of, you're in another country, especially in the Netherlands and Poland. I didn't know any of the language. A lot of people speak English, so, it's a lot easier to travel now with smartphones that translate, languages quickly. I think if it's important for me to say that a renewal leave is different than taking a trip to see another part of the world. Now, I took a renewal leave in another part of the world and happened to be blessed by seeing other cultures and experiencing other people and food. But a renewal leave is about renewal. And so, in reflecting on what happened to me, I would say that there are three things that I would share with you that I want you to hear, because three things that happened to me, or three things I experienced. The first is an opportunity to reflect. I remember walking off the airplane in Amsterdam carrying the backpack, and it was heavy, heavy, heavy. And I was thinking, this seems so good, because it was almost 40 years ago that I'd lived in Switzerland alone in another world by myself. And I thought, oh, this feels pretty good, walking through the airport. And it was like a bookend. Now, I hope I live many more years, but it was almost like a bookend. A lot has happened in my life in those some 4 decades, a lot. And so one of the things that this trip afforded me to do was to reflect on all that's happened in my life. And some of that was not an intentional reflection. In Amsterdam, the first couple of nights, I had the weirdest dreams. I mean, really weird dreams. Dreams that involved employees or members of one church showing up and being a part of another church that I served. And I came to understand those dreams eventually to be almost, and don't misunderstand me, purge is too hard a word, but a sorting and cleaning. Now, in a dream, dreams happen as they happen, but it was almost like catharsis. Purge is probably too strong a word, but just a lot of things go on. I've had a lot of wonderful experiences, but when you're in ministry and you try to lead a congregation, as we now know in the season we're in, amen? When you try to lead a congregation, you're going to, pardon my French, Cleveland County terms, you're going to piss people off. And so through the years, those dreams sort of resurfaced some of that. And some of the people that I pissed off needed to be pissed off because they were acting so immaturely. And some of the people I pissed off, I hope God forgives me. So reflecting and then thinking about what wonderful opportunities I've had that God has afforded me in life. And so one Sunday morning, sitting in a coffee shop in Munich, I was watching a couple of sermons, one from a mentor of mine who was very instrumental in not really directing me to go into ministry, but showing me what a Methodist minister could be. And he was very instrumental in Wilderness Trail, the hiking ministry I was involved in. And so one Sunday morning, I just randomly picked a sermon to watch off of YouTube, one of his sermons. And at the end of the sermon, I did a screenshot of my iPad of that sermon on the screen and gave him a text and said, I'm sitting in a coffee shop in Munich. Just randomly picked one of your services. Want you to know I'm thinking about you today. And so sitting there in that coffee shop, you see, I was able to be grateful. I've experienced a lot of wonderful theologians and preachers because of my work in the church. And I've experienced a lot of wonderful lay people that have helped me grow into being the minister. So the privilege, it's not that I've been entitled to all these gifts, but just the privilege that I've gotten. So that was sort of the reflect piece. Then the second was the refueling. And refueling, being in another part of the world, sort of getting out of your comfort zone, seeing how big God is, really how big God is. See, I think I've got problems in Jamestown. And then I go over in another part of the world and I think, hey, Jamestown's pretty small compared to all that God has to keep God's mind around that's all going on in the world. See, get perspective. Get perspective about how big the world is. Helps you to understand. And then the perspective of going in churches that have been there for 1,500 years and realizing that the gospel has been around for a long time and changed a lot of lives, but also being reminded in certain cities of how much harm Christians have done to one another fighting over things. You see that in Germany especially. So the refueling of being in a different place, getting out of one's comfort zone, but then I just spent an incredible amount of time reading and studying. I would send a picture home of Willis. Some mornings it was me on the elevator going out for the day, just various things. One morning I sent her a picture. I was sitting in a coffee shop. I got my vest on for any of you who want. And so I'm having coffee. There's my iPad, and I have my little journal. And I was doing some studying on Bonhoeffer, and so I just, that was my picture of the day to send to Willis so that when she woke up a few hours later, she could see me and I could say good morning from her. So refueling, spending a lot of time reading a variety of things. I watched a couple of, one thing I watched because I was doing the Bonhoeffer thing. On Netflix, there's a program, Hitler and the Nazis, Evil on Trial, 6 episodes. So I watched that and learned a tremendous amount. Then there was another long documentary series that was 9 episodes, and I watched that and learned about the fall of the Berlin Wall and things of that nature that related to my trip. But really, I remember, when I was sitting in a home in Switzerland outside of Zurich at a family that had invited me to dinner when Gorbachev and Reagan met. Do you remember when they met? And I remember they showed this on that video. I'm going too long, I know. On that video, they showed them walking across a field in this documentary, and I remember sitting in Switzerland watching that moment. So in other words, watching those was reliving my life. And then the last piece, I'll move on, was recommitment. By the time the trip ended, I woke up on a Saturday. I was to fly home on Monday. And after 2 months, it was not until that Saturday that I woke up and said, I'm ready to go home. And then I got home, and I had a few weeks before I came back to work. And Wendy invited me to have a debriefing of all that had happened, and it was a 6-page single-space debriefing. And when she finished going through all of that, and I realized how well she had done, and staff parish and the staff, everybody had done, that was on a Wednesday evening. On Thursday, I woke up and said, I'm ready to go to work. But I didn't come in that day because that would not have been fair to the staff because they were not expecting me until Monday. But it was beautiful how being away, studying, experiencing other things, and really getting clear. That morning I said, I'm ready to come home. And I said to myself, I am ready to come home and preach and teach and pastoral care. That's what I'm clear about. Now, I have to do other things, obviously, but those are the things that I really feel called to do. That came clear to me being away from here. But I still know I have to lead, so I never would have imagined I would be coming back and we would be talking about going to one service, but we are. And that's not easy. Tuesday I went home, and not because I was troubled about what we're going through. I went home and I didn't go to sleep till about 3:30 because I knew that people are disappointed and hurt. But that's what leadership is, brothers and sisters, and that came clear to me. The word courage came clear to me. Courage in doing, this was when I was over there, courage in doing the right thing, knowing you're going to hurt some people. But if it's for the sake of the kingdom, then you just have to do it and give your blessings on people and trust that God will take care of those who say yes and those who have said we can't do it, that God will take care of them too. That's the recommitment part, getting clear, and I think God gave that to me. One last thing, this is probably the most important thing, and I know she's got another question. In that recommitment piece, I was sitting that same morning I was at the coffee shop. A young lady was down from me working on her computer, and in German she asked me if the internet was working. And I couldn't converse with her in German, so I said in German, I said, "Do you speak English?" And she said, "Yes." And so she said, "Well, where are you from?" I told her, and I said, "You speak great English. What did you ask me?" And she said, "Does the internet work?" And I said, "No, I'm using my phone right now." And we started a conversation. I asked her why her English is so good. She's a college student, university student in London, and art history, and she told me a bit about that. And then she said, "Well, what are you doing in Dresden?" And I said, "I'm on," and I thought about it, renewal leave. A young person, they're not going to get a renewal leave. I said, "So university student," and I said, "I'm on a sabbatical." She said, "Oh, a sabbatical. What do you do?" And I said, "I work in the church. I'm a minister." And she said, "Oh, I'm exploring the Christian faith. I'm new to the faith." Now, Germans are very reserved. Really, it was unusual that she struck up a conversation with me. And typically, you call one another Mr. and Mrs. until a certain time way into a relationship before you ever start using first names. So the fact she engaged me and kept engaging me, in fact, she asked me, she said, "Do you think Germans are friendly?" And I said, "I've had nothing but a great experience." So I wished her well on her luck, and then I thought, hey, wait a minute, I've got something I can share with her. That morning when I left the hotel to go to the coffee shop to do some reading, I had a little devotional that I had taken with me that I had spent some time reading that morning in Munich in the coffee shop. I read the first chapter of that devotional book. Delightful, author I knew well. I had that devotional book in my room in Dresden, and I normally didn't carry it around because everything gets heavy when you're walking around for 2 or 3 miles. And so, but that morning something said, "Take that, you may need it." And so I stuck that in my backpack with my iPad. And that morning, after we had visited everything, I turned around and I thought, I'm going to give her that devotional book. And so I said, "Can I give you something?" And she said, "Yes." And so in the devotional book, I wrote, "Dear Tina, all the best on your journey. Grace and peace, Reverend David Green." God is still working in the world, brothers and sisters. And that was almost as if God said to me, "David, that's what you are to do." Now I come home and guess what I'm doing? Trying to figure out when we're going to have a worship service. Okay, God, what's going on here? But what I experienced in that moment is this is what you are called to do, which is give away the gift of faith and help someone discover where they can find meaning and purpose and joy and peace in life. So I hope, after it was, I didn't put Jamestown, I didn't put a lot of identity, but I started feeling bad. And so I went back that evening and I Googled Reverend David Green in case she ever wanted to reach out to me. And I'm way down on the list, but one day I'm trusting that I'll get an email from Tina. Later that evening, I went to the hotel and emailed a fellow colleague of the guy that wrote the book, whose email I had, and told him the story of that experience. And this guy actually said, "I spent a year in Germany when I graduated studying theology." And so that was sort of a neat connection there. So it's a big world, but God's big enough to be at work in all facets, in all places, in all ages, even in what was formerly a communist country.
So one of the things you talked about before you left on your trip was going to the Dietrich Bonhoeffer seminar. Tell us something that you learned at the seminar that you found very interesting.
Oh, yeah, that was such an awesome experience. The thing that if I could go back and do anything over again, and I wouldn't, because I wouldn't be who I am today if I had not majored in what I majored in and had the job that I had so I don't have regrets, but I wish if I could do something, I wish I could have majored in history, because history is so fascinating to me. And I'm getting to the answer, trust me. I always thought, well, Hitler was a bad person, and everyone knew he was bad, but somehow he was able to do all that he did to cause so much harm and destruction. That's a complete misreading of history. Bonhoeffer knew that he was bad, even when Bonhoeffer was in his early 20s. And unfortunately, the vast majority of people in Germany did not know that Hitler was bad. What happened is, after World War I, they made Germany sign the Treaty of Versailles, which was really severely punished Germany so they couldn't get up off their feet again after World War I. And there was the Great Depression, and Germany had borrowed a lot of money from banks in America, and the banks were calling those notes and loans in. And so people were out of jobs. Inflation was rampant. And people were eating sandwiches made of sawmill dust. And Bonhoeffer writes about going to the university, and one day his lunch was like 10 million francs or marks, 10 million marks. And then the next couple of days, a lunch, 30 million. Inflation was rampant. And so Hitler, when he first came along, he was ignored. In fact, he tried to cause an uprising and spent 9 months in prison, and that's where he wrote Mein Kampf. And then, because of the economic circumstances and because there had been a progressive movement in Germany that some people, especially in the church, were opposed to, and because of the conflict in the East, in Russia and Eastern countries with communists, there was this perfect storm that enabled Hitler to come to power. And so when Hitler came to power, the church, a state church, so the state paid the salaries of the ministers and whatnot, but nevertheless, the church capitulated to Hitler immediately. And Bonhoeffer, on the day Hitler gave his first speech, Bonhoeffer also did a radio address. I don't know how he arranged that, but Hitler talked about being the Führer, the leader now of the country, and Bonhoeffer came on a radio address and said, really a different one, but the only Führer is Jesus Christ. And about midway into his speech, Bonhoeffer's radio address was cut off by the state government. And what was amazing was how those citizens in the church capitulated to Hitler. Hitler claimed to be a Christian, but, well, that's another discussion. And what he was a master of, he was able, Martin Luther, the great reformer, was in many ways anti-Semitic. And the Lutheran faith was ingrained in Germany, so there was this bias toward Jews. And then with the economy in the tank and all these international pressures, the Jews were labeled as the reason. They were, many of them, bank, prosperous, professional, so they got blamed for the hardship in Germany, and eventually were blamed for the Germans pulling out and losing World War I. They were called the backstabbers. And so many German citizens just capitulated. And it was not until, this is another side note, I'll just, as an add-on and I'll stop, but It was not a, you remember the Holocaust miniseries that came out many years ago? Meryl Streep was a young actress and she was in that. It was not until that miniseries came out and made its way to Germany that really the Germans began to take responsibility for the Holocaust. They didn't immediately come after the war and say, oh my God, we've done wrong. It was really when their children and grandchildren said to them, who were in places of power and who were living during the Hitler regime, what did you do? What were you doing? And so it was not until really the 80s that the concentration camps became a place that was important for the Germans. And what's happening, the reason that Confederate flag is flying is because in Germany today there is a pushback, from certain groups who want to go back, to a certain time. And they've had a lot of immigrants from Syria and other places come in that's created some turmoil. And so it's just interesting to see Germany sort of having to work through some of this again. So I would say what I was amazed at and learned is how insightful Bonhoeffer was in recognizing the threat of Hitler. And he tried to reform the church, Bonhoeffer, that didn't work. He tried to start an organization within the church, the Confessing Church, that didn't work. And then and we were in the home where these discussions were had, he had relatives high up in the German government that were planning an overthrow of Hitler. Bonhoeffer was not involved no matter what the movie says. He was not an assassin or spy. But he supported it because he realized if the church is not going to address the evil of Hitler, then we got to find somebody that will address this evil. And so he was supportive of that, and he had served as a liaison to other allied countries in the church movement, and because of his connection with that, Bonhoeffer was executed just a few weeks before the concentration camp where he was at was liberated. So I would say what I learned was Bonhoeffer's understanding of the harm of Hitler, and I grew to understand the capitulation of everyone in Germany to Hitler. They were in desperate place. And Hitler promised them many things. And for a while, things were really, really good. But then Hitler's true colors came out and the beginning of the end began to happen.
Yeah. Thanks, David. You'll remember that Josh and I lived in Germany for a year, and we learned while we were there that it is illegal, the Germans made it illegal to deny that the Holocaust ever happened. So, and they did that so that they would never forget. That they would never forget the harm that comes from following someone who does such evil. Yeah. So that's cool that Bonhoeffer was a big part of that. A couple of questions left, David, a little bit more lighthearted. Did you experience any surprises or challenges during your travels?
One of the surprises is the importance. I've exercised my whole life, and then COVID came along, gained a lot of weight, stopped exercising. And just the importance of walking. I was walking a mile or two or more one day, as I said, about 7 miles. And do you know what happened to me? I know this is probably a surprise to you that this was surprising to me. But that was so helpful because when I came home, guess what I did? I stopped walking. And before long, I was having trouble walking because my muscles were stiffening up. So just the power of getting out and doing things with your body and walking around and being there in those markets and seeing people visiting with each other and not looking at their phones. And the shops on Sundays were closed. Isn't that amazing? Some of those European countries, the participation in the church is not anywhere close to ours, but the society is set up based on Christian principles. And so even though they're not in church, people over there are resting on the Sabbath and doing what's important, spending time with family and friends. So that was very illuminating to me.
So if you guys are interested in doing more walking, we have a walking ministry starting on Sunday evenings next Sunday at 5 o'clock. So come on to the fellowship hall. We'll go walking.
In our new home, we have a weight room and a treadmill and all the exercise things downstairs. And I keep telling my wife, God is calling me, but I'm not quite there yet. So y'all can ask me how I'm doing. You can help hold me accountable.
So what has been the best part of coming home?
Oh yeah, that's a great question.
Us.
Of course. In Poland, I went to a restaurant, and Mark Foster had told me about this place. And it was the best meal I had. And it is a place that has been brewing beer since the 13th century. And on the glass, it had 1273. That's when they opened. That's 1273. And that was fabulous. But then coming home and really just being grateful for where I live, as wonderful as all that was, and so wonderful, just being grateful for being here in this place in the United States. And then, of course, in terms of people, seeing my family, Willis was there at the airport. I got diverted coming home, so how that goes, but it wasn't too bad. But she was patient, and she collected me, and I went into a new home. I left living in one place and came back home to the States, and I'm living now in a new place. And so seeing my family, the kids in that new place, and then being here, as I've said, that first Sunday I was back, I didn't have to do anything but attend worship. And it was just delightful to sit up there on that front row that Sunday and watch all of y'all take communion and realize this is where I'm supposed to be. And so, that's just the affirmation of where I'm supposed to be. I was having lunch with Preston Davis yesterday, telling him about the trip and everything, and talking about gratitude. And this is the honest again. I'm 62. My dad died at 62. And in recent days and weeks, I've focused a lot on gratitude, thinking about where all I've been and what all I've done, all the people I've met, all the experiences I've met. And I could die right now and be very grateful for my life. Hadn't always been easy. Not saying I'm grateful because it's always been easy. Just grateful for the gift of life. Now, I don't want to die. I want to live many more years. I want to spend some more years with y'all, hopefully, and with hopefully seeing my kids get married and having some grandbabies and all that stuff, and doing some more traveling and doing all that. But what I want you to hear me say, and I think this is important, and maybe you need to get away with God sometime and get to this place, that if you went to bed tonight and didn't wake up tomorrow, that when you went to bed, you could say, I'm grateful for my life. And I just encourage you to think about that. That'll be reflected in my stewardship letter. Got to come home and write a stewardship letter. Wow. Oh boy, I was thinking about that the whole time I was over there. Can't wait to come home and write a stewardship letter. My wife said, just use Chat GTP or whatever that thing is. And you'll know that the letter that I wrote is not AI. It's real personal. And it's about gratitude. So that's what's happened too. Just a good place to be in life right now, I think.
Now, when you came home, did Willis have all the boxes unpacked, or did she leave some for you?
Yeah. My wife is wonderful. Now, I will say, before I left, I arranged for many things. We moved the place we went from a 6-bedroom house to a 2-bedroom apartment in a 55 and above community in Winston-Salem. And so we had to get rid of a lot of stuff, and I did a lot of that before I left. Even the day of my flight, I was arranging for our Duke Energy power to be turned on. So I didn't leave it all up to Willis. But I will say, and she pointed this out, she said, this is a good thing. She said, if you had not been out of the country, you would not have gotten a renewal leave. Because I would have been moving and unpacking. And so she really gave me permission not to regret that she was having to do so much. And now, when I did get home, she was a stickler. I think she enjoyed me not being around. Because I've never heard her say to me so much, now focus, like if I would do something that she did, like put a fork back, the wrong way in the drawer. And not long after I got home, we moved, and I didn't move my shoe racks, those particle board things you put on the floor to put your shoes on to give you a little more storage. I didn't pack those. And so when I got home, I guess I made a mistake. I ordered some on Amazon. And so they arrived, and Willis saw, what are those? Well, the shoe rack. Well, I've already got the closet figured out. I know where your shoes are going to go, and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, I'll send it back, if you want me to. But she got off of her high horse eventually, and she said, okay, what were you thinking? Well, the shoe racks are in our closet now with my shoes on them, and she was able to come around to that. But, she gave me the permission to be away without feeling guilty. She sort of enjoyed me being away, and then she had to learn how it was to live with me again. So she's grateful that I'm back.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David. We are grateful to have you back, and we look forward to see where you and the Lord lead us in the coming days and weeks and years, and we're just thankful for you being here.
Thank you.